My name is PhilippHeck. I'm the Robert A. Pritzker Associate Curator for Meteorites and Polar Studies here at the Field Museum of Natural History in Chicago. I'm the curator in charge of the meteorite collection here at the Field Museum. I make sure that the scientific community has access to those meteorites by sample requests, but I'm also studying them myself. So I'm having my own meteorite research program, and I'm also teaching at the University of Chicago. And this center exists thanks to a major grant from the Chicago-based Tavani Foundation. This enables us to do meteoritics research and polar studies research in perpetuity. The Murchison meteorite is one of our treasures at the Field Museum here, and one of the treasured meteorites of the scientific community. The oldest meteorites are thought to be the carbonaceous chondrites like Murchison. They formed in the very earliest days of the solar system, or basically the components of them formed very early on, and they define actually the start of the solar system. They come from different asteroids, from carbon-rich asteroids, and they're mainly thought to be from the outer asteroid belt. But all these meteorites have one thing in common. They were ejected from their parent body in a collision. The interesting thing, they haven't changed much since then, so they can actually, by studying this meteorite, we can learn something about the very early solar system. The physical conditions, the chemistry, all that defines what we have today. So that's why the early solar system is so important to us. Part of this meteorite is real stardust. This means these are minerals that formed in the outflows and ejecta of stars that don't exist anymore. But it's a multitude of stars of different types that form these materials. The stars are essentially the element factories that produce the elements that our world, our everyday world, is made of. So the carbon, for example, is made in solar-like stars at the end of their life. The heavier elements, the metals, are made in more massive stars. And we actually can find in meteorites like Murchison, we can find individual grains of pre-solar stardust. It floated through our galaxy for millions or billions of years and became part of the solar nebula from which the planets and the planetesimals and asteroids formed. Murchison is the most prolific source of pre-solar grains. Scientists already suspected that there would be pre-solar grains in meteorites. If you take a chunk of this meteorite off, analyze it in a mass spectrometer, you can analyze the major components and so on, find it's a solar system object, but you can also measure trace gases, trace elements, and see that the composition of those trace elements is very different. The isotopic composition, so the variety of these trace elements can be such that no solar system process can explain their presence. There was a decades-long search in Chicago at the University of Chicago with carbonaceous chondrites, Murchison and others to find the carrier of this exotic component. And finally, in 1987, the carrier of the exotic xenon component was discovered. We can do astronomy, astrophysics, with a sample in our laboratory, with a real sample of a star. Actually, this is a sample of a multitude of stars. So several dozens or hundreds of parent stars are in this little vial. Some of those minerals are 2 billion years older than the Sun. That makes them 6.5 billion years old. And they're still here as they have formed. They haven't changed. We're coming up on the 50th anniversary of the Murchison meteorite fall. The bulk of our knowledge of the early solar system comes from the study of Murchison and a few other carbonaceous chondrites. The Field Museum holds the largest fraction of Murchison in its collection, and it's made available for the scientific community, and it provided really great resource for studying the early solar system. The Murchison meteorite fell on September 28 in 1969 in Australia, near a town called Murchison, north of Melbourne. It's in a habited area, so people were hunting for the meteorite and picked it up shortly after it fell. The fall happened after the Apollo 11 lunar landings 50 years ago, so the world's top labs were already equipped with analytical equipment to study lunar rocks that were brought back by the astronauts. So they were ready for extraterrestrial rocks. Murchison came at the perfect time, and they could go into these top labs and be analyzed. We are very grateful that the community of Murchison made these rocks available to science. Even 50 years later, after the fall, the Murchison meteorite is an extremely valuable resource for science. Many PhD students have current theses on Murchison. I made my thesis myself on Murchison. It still has many secrets that it keeps. It's a true treasure trove for science.